Hello, welcome to Severe Weather Outlooks. I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. This is a video that looks at the potential for severe weather, sometimes as far as a week out. And sometimes I will start this with the reports from the day before, which is basically what you're looking at here, tornado reports. Past 24 hours, I'm recording this on a Monday morning. So it gets all that Illinois activity and quite a slew of tornadoes hitting Illinois, which they have had more than their fair share of either notable, notorious, or now deadly tornadoes affecting them. The deadly tornadoes were in Jefferson County north of Mount Vernon yesterday. And a lot of those tornado reports went well into the evening hours, some of them even past 10 p.m. Local time, which that is a little bit unnerving for folks. And then we had an early morning tornado, a very strong indicator on radar near Ozark in northwest Arkansas. So that was early in the morning yesterday. Just barely made this report actually, since it goes back 24 hours. Now we'll take a look at today's severe thunderstorm risk. You can definitely see where the cooler and drier air is from Nebraska and Missouri northeastward to the Great Lakes, but there are some pockets of level 2 out in the high plains of Colorado, Wyoming, and also in the panhandle of Nebraska, a little bit down there with that current squall line in Arkansas down to northeastern Texas, and then the largest swath of possible severe weather from central Mississippi all the way up to New York City itself and all areas on both sides of that line. The tornado risk is in 3 pockets as well. There's the high plains risk, and then there's the northern Mississippi, Alabama up to maybe Nashville risk, and then there's a risk in Pennsylvania and Maryland, including the nation's capital, Baltimore, New York, and Philadelphia, also in that 2% chance of a tornado within 25-mile area. The wind risk is definitely highlighted at 15% in that eastern zone. So Birmingham, Chattanooga, Knoxville, Roanoke, Washington, D.C., Raleigh, Charlotte, on the edge of it, up to Harrisburg, Philadelphia, New York, all those areas in that severe wind risk today. That's the highest in the country. And the opposite side is where the hail is. So you can see the hail risk is at 15% in eastern Colorado, pretty much in that slight risk area, which you would pretty much define as being a hail and small tornado risk. That's the reason for the slight risk, basically, up in that area. NATOcast does put the highest percentages of tornadoes at 5%, right around the northern part of Alabama, and also right around Philadelphia and over into parts of New Jersey. A little bit of a risk there in the high plains too. That's NATOcast look at things at least. And then at Colorado State University, pretty much the same 3 areas for tornado risk. Maybe a little bit of a dribbling there through southern Arkansas, parts of Texas there. Not very high though, and they're definitely highlighting the wind risk that will exist today once that squall line gets going from Virginia southward, almost to Atlanta. And we take a look. That's Monday. And then Tuesday, we have, again, a slight risk popping up in the high plains, encompassing much of the western half of Kansas up to Denver, Sterling, Colorado's in there. And then just kind of a marginal risk goes all the way up to Minnesota and down through parts of southwest Missouri and northern Arkansas. And that's Tuesday again. And the tornado risk on Tuesday is a little bit elevated, I guess you could say, from Cheyenne down to, Lyman, Colorado, almost to Lamar, Colorado. And then if we take a look at Tuesday's tornado outlook, it pretty much agrees with the Colorado assessment. Does put a little bit of an interesting risk there in southeast Kansas and northern Oklahoma. Keeps the hail and the wind risk at 15% and shifts it around as it typically does. So the interpretation of that is, so when you see that yellow hail area, upper right-hand corner, those are initial storms, and then the wind risk is definitely either those that become a big wind bag, as it's referred to as in the industry, in other words, just a overnight MCS squall line type thing, or it might be a completely different area. I did not look at the model day. I will tell you on that one. And then Tuesday, the severe wind risk is at its highest. There, 15% through central parts of Kansas, a little sliver of northern Oklahoma, and that is about consistent with the ongoing other forecast, and that's the hail risk, which is, again, very common this time of year in northeast Colorado for sure. Then on Wednesday, again, that same area of Colorado, if you're a storm chaser, you're going to be parked in Colorado for the next couple of days, and you're going to do fine. And on Wednesday, a slight risk of all modes of severe weather there. CSU agreeing with that. A little bit of tornado risk still with that. A little bit of wind risk in Arkansas. Otherwise, that pretty much highlights it. Then on Thursday, it shifts north even more so slightly. It gets into portions. It doesn't go into no, it doesn't get into Montana quite, but it does cover eastern Wyoming and basically the panhandle of Nebraska. And then there's the outlook I just showed you on the right, and this is CSU's look at that. They do extend the severe weather risks through Texas, Oklahoma, and a small sliver of maybe northern Arkansas on Thursday, getting pretty far out there though. On Friday, enough to mention, again, I only really show this if the yellow 15% shows up in any significant way or has done so consistently. So Friday, it's still kind of showing up, and it was important to show Saturday too, which does have a rather large 15% probability according to the learning machine they use. Straight down the pike there in the Central Plains from Texas all the way to North Dakota. Even on Sunday, there's a little bit of 15% risk. Clearly, that's a weather system moving across the northern plains. So Minnesota, parts of Wisconsin, pretty much all of Iowa, and small chunks of the surrounding states in that 15% risk. Then here's the supercell composite. It is basically, this kind of sums up, or at least it should match up pretty well as an accumulation of everything I just showed you, because this is a 7-day forecast. We went 7 days roughly into the future with the other maps. So that lines up pretty well. And then June 29th through July 5th, still a lot of firecrackers around the 4th, possibly in the northern plains, getting down as far south as parts of Nebraska and Iowa, Illinois, Chicagoland area, emphasized there. And then on July 6th through the 12th, the supercell composite outlook still going pretty hot, with the reds being the highest you can get, 30%, and but shifting north definitely, as you might expect in the summertime.